I've created this YouTube channel with one purpose in mind: to reach people like me, who are on the same path like I am. I was the most hard-headed atheist, and I think it was partly because of me and partly because of my circumstances and the society I lived in. I was never like that. I remember I used to believe in God, and my mom taught me this prayer about a little angel, a guardian angel that God assigned to us. And I would pray this prayer almost every night, if not every night. But I remember my mom used to take me to church with her, and I didn't enjoy it at all. I thought it was just empty rituals. The priest was singing, you couldn't ask any questions, everyone was just sitting there. I was bored out of my mind. I couldn't relate to any of that. And then to hear all the other bad stuff about God, that he's a tyrant, that kills people, he only has these rules, and if you don't do those rules, he will strike you down and torture you forever. And there are so many misconceptions about God. And I thought, you know what? This is a set of beliefs for stupid people, for brainwashed people. I used to ridicule Christians, and it came from a position of pride, I think, on my part. I thought I was so much smarter than these guys. I thought they just listened to the propaganda, and I truly believed that there was no God, because it couldn't have been, right? This is just stupid. How can you believe in someone that sits in the sky and gives us orders, and he's not here with us, and we can just do whatever we want? And there is so much evil in the world. People are dying left and right. How can there be a God? So I just decided not to believe in this God anymore. So I lived my life on my terms, and it was all fine and dandy until it was not. I remember I was 23 years old, 22 or 23 years old. I was at university, and my life was a mess. I used to lie to my parents. I remember my mom used to call me, and I would play video games all night, and she would call me in the morning, and I just went to sleep. I would skip an entire day of courses at university, and she would call me in the morning, and I would pretend that I just woke up when actually I just went to sleep. And I would drink and smoke and do all this, smoke cigarettes, and not only, I would smoke everything I could get my hands on. And I constantly lied to my parents, especially my mom. And I think she figured it out, but who wants to accept that their child lies to them constantly? And I was always the good child. I have two brothers that are twins. They were the troublemakers, and I was the good one. I always listened to my parents, I always did what they told me. But not this time. And I messed up badly. I've already failed 1 year of uni, and now I was about to get expelled for good. And I always told my friends that I quit. I dropped out because I didn't like it. And it was partially true, I guess, because I skipped most of the classes. I was in year 3. 1 more year and I could have finished it. But there was no interest there. I was not interested in it. And it was a good school, one of the best schools in Romania. So one day my mom went to the university because she kind of figured it out. And she asked for my report, all my grades and my attendance and everything. And she saw that I skipped almost 1 year and I was about to get expelled. And that's when my journey stopped, and that's when the spell got broken, I guess. So I went back home to my parents' house, and one night I went outside and I started to think and to ask myself some existential questions that I've never asked myself before, because I was living on autopilot. So I asked myself, why am I here? Why was I born? What's the purpose of my life? I can't remember anything before I was born. So I must have not been born for eternity. What changed all of a sudden? Why am I here? What happens if I end it all? And I actually thought about that, because I've actually hit my rock bottom. That was my rock bottom. Nothing made sense in my life anymore. And I had no idea what would happen next. An option was to get a dead-end job in my town, and I applied for a bunch of jobs, and they wouldn't even consider me because I had absolutely no skills. So I asked myself all these questions, and I couldn't get an answer. And I vowed to myself then that I wouldn't stop until I find the truth to these answers. And I was an atheist, so of course I wouldn't find the answers in God. So I just put God in a box, and I started looking everywhere else. And there was one night I was partying with my friends. I was in a club, and it was Friday night. And I got a call from my brother. My brother was in the UK, and I remember it was Friday around 12 o'clock at night. And he said to me, I have a job for you, but you have to be here on Sunday. So not tomorrow, the day after tomorrow. And it was a night porter job at a hotel. And I said, sure, sign me up. So on Sunday I was on a plane to the UK, and on Sunday afternoon I was working in the hotel. And that went on for about a year and a half, until the hotel owners gave me less and less shifts. They kind of wanted me gone for some reason. The management changed, everything fell apart. So I took a break and I went back to Romania. I had some money saved up, and I stayed there for maybe 8 months, and I wasted all the money that I've saved up in a year and a half. I wasted everything. And at one point I called my brother in the UK and I asked him, can you find me a job? Can you get me a job? And he was working at a car wash then. He had his own car wash. He was managing a car wash, one of those automated ones with brushes. And he said, come work for me. And he gave me £30 a day. I believe that was when God started to call me. Because whenever God has a mission for you, He humbles you first. It happened with Moses when God was supposed to do something incredible through Moses, but He had to humble him first. So he was a shepherd for 40 years. It happened with Jacob as well, where he worked for Laban, for his uncle, for about 20 years, if not more, and he got tricked out of his wages and whatnot. So I believe that's when God started to humble me and prepare me, but I didn't know it at the time. So I started looking into all of this Eastern mysticism because I still wanted to find the answers to those questions. Why am I here? What's the purpose, if there is one? And I started looking into this Eastern mysticism, and I was watching everything I could get my hands on like Buddhas and gurus, and I had this guy Osho. He was an Indian guru, and he was this eccentric man. He used to wear some crazy sunglasses and some fancy hats, and he would drive Rolls Royces, and he had an answer for everything. And he said he'd read 10,000 books in his life, which seems absurd. And I was talking to one of my friends at the time who was a Christian, and I told him, bro, I think I found him. This guy is the real deal. He speaks so much truth. And my friend said, he may speak truth, but there is one who is the truth, and he's Jesus. And I thought, come on, give me a break with your Christianity. You're just trying to brainwash me. So there was these little seeds that were planted in my head all along. And I started to practice meditation. I would meditate and read and practice how to properly meditate. And I was doing this. I was watching my breath. I was observing how I breathe in and then how I breathe out. And I would do it for at least half an hour every day. And I think at one point I could stay there for an hour and just watch my breath. And I never enjoyed that practice. I always thought it was weird. And I always thought I could benefit more from just taking a nap. I couldn't see any benefits from it. And at one point, one thing led to another, and I was looking at these conspiracy videos, all sorts of stuff, from flat earth to celebrities worshipping the devil and magicians practicing demonology and levitating and doing all sorts of crazy stuff like eating swords and eating glass and coals on fire and walking on fire and all sorts of crazy stuff. And I started to believe in this personification of evil, in Satan basically. And I saw how these celebrities are being worshipped, and they themselves were worshipping the devil and were practicing these cult rituals, and they were making sacrifices. And if you have heard about this guy called Aleister Crowley, he was a really famous occultist. At one point he was called the wickedest man on earth, and he called himself Satan's chief of staff, and he wrote a book called the Book of the Law, or Thelema, and Thelema means the will. And the main idea in that book is that there is only one law, and it is to do whatever you want, do what thou wilt. And he wrote many books about practicing magic and how to do rituals and sacrifices. And he was saying in one of his books that a very potent sacrifice is a child sacrifice, and all of these crazy, wicked things that you can't even imagine. And he got this information to write these books from automatic writing. So he was kind of channeling. He said he was in contact with this entity, this alien, and alien was giving him this information. Of course, aliens are demons, but we'll talk about this later. And I really believed that there's this evil being that is influencing the world. And with that belief, I thought, hey, if there is this evil being, there must be a good being, the opposite. So out of all these conspiracy videos, I thought the Christians were making the most sense. And at that point, I was watching this guy called Walter Fight. He was a Christian. He has a lot of these conspiracy videos. Well, they're not actually conspiracy, but more like these controversial videos on topics about secret societies and Freemasons and who run the world and the Roman Catholic Church and all the crazy stuff they've been doing. And I started to believe in God, slowly but surely. I wanted to look for the truth, and I put God in a box, and I didn't know that God was the truth. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father except by me. Jesus was kind of waving his hand from the box. Hello, you're searching for the truth, but I am the truth. So at one point, I started reading the Bible. I thought, if there is a God, I want to learn more about him, because I won't give my life, I won't worship any God just because he's God. He has to reach my standard. He has to not be a tyrant. He has to love us, and all of these criteria. And at one point, of course, I was still doing my thing at the time. I was smoking, drinking. I was so deep into these things. And I remember at one point, after reading the Bible, I went on my knees and I said to God, I now know you exist. I know you're real. And I poured myself. I asked for forgiveness for all this time that I've lived my life without him, for spending so much time without him, and for doing my own thing. And that was when, I think it was at least 10 minutes, that I started to weep, and I was bawling. My eyes were blocked. My nose was blocked. I couldn't see, I couldn't breathe. I could only breathe through my mouth. It was like all my senses and my channels of communication were blocked, and I could only think. And that's when I felt, if you can think of that and imagine this, I felt like God was hugging me. And this went on for about 10 minutes. And that's when I first felt the love of God. And I felt like Jesus was hugging me as I was laying there. That was such a crazy experience. And that's when I continued to read the Bible. And this went on for a year. It took me 1 year to study the Bible. And you know what? When I first realized that God exists, everything else clicked. All my questions that I couldn't find an answer for all these years. It took me 7 years of deep search for the truth. to finally find Him. And all my questions were answered. I now know why I was created. It was created so that I can glorify God, so that I can represent God and be an ambassador for Him. I know my purpose now. I know why I'm here now. And I wanted to create this YouTube channel so that I could reach people like me. People who haven't had the privilege to know God. I've lived 30 years of my life without God, and I'll never get those years back. In these 8 years that I walked with God, stumbled a little bit, got back up, fell down, got right back up. These were the best years of my life. And now I was thinking one day, people are so privileged to have parents that tell them about God, tell them that He loves us so much, and that He came down, He left His throne above, He left heavens and came down to us and gave His life for us, gave Himself for us, so that we can all be reconciled with Him and be together and live forever in His presence. And He called us friends. And while we were yet sinners, the Bible says, He gave His life for us. And if this message helps even one person, I'm happy with that. May God bless you.